Hi, everybody. Today we are talking about COVID-19 and coping with it and looking at the spiritual aspect in Prince George's County. And I'm joined by two of the chaplains from Hospice of the Chesapeake, Reverend Brian Madison and Reverend Renee Norwood. Renee, what are you seeing in Prince George's County, regarding spirituality and the community? What's happening there?
Yeah, I'm seeing a lot of patients that are actually more so processing their feelings. A lot of emotions are coming up, a lot of anger around this COVID, especially because we don't know what the end is going to be. It would be different if we knew that it was only going to be for a set amount of time. So now, because there's the unknown and the not knowing, that's what I'm, finding with a lot of patients processing their feelings. How long is this going to last? And now, I'm alone, and because I'm even with my loved one, but I can't have people around me to grieve or to, console with me.
Right. I would think it's affecting even the church communities or the religious communities as well, right? Because we're not able to be together in person.
Yes, especially because now we're not able to worship together. And so we're doing a lot of virtual, and so it's kind of like a high touch, so to speak. You're not really touching or being able to worship together. As we always say, like-minded people sharing the like-minded faith, but now we're not able to come together. And so we're, again, on the outside, looking in, worshiping. Yeah. And that feels so unnatural for persons that have grown up in that foundation, whatever their faith or religious or spirituality is.
Right, that they've practiced it a certain way and now that's gone, that we don't have that ability to be together like that. Brian, are there any other things that you've noticed with regard to how it's affected people spiritually?
Well, one of the things is that Renee had touched on it about not being able to physically attend worship service. For a lot of seniors, what happens is they look forward to the Sunday worship service, and now that's been taken away from them. And I know that a lot of churches have gone to virtual worship where you can click on a website and they have worship service through led by the pastor, where he's or she is providing worship service. But and a lot of senior citizens are not tech savvy, so they're missing out, and they're missing that part of their life. And I'm hoping that there will be ways that can be developed to where they can at least maybe just call in and hear the sermon that was presented in a live worship, in a virtual worship service.
Yeah. That's a really good point. I hadn't even thought about that, but the whole, that whole technology piece that doesn't necessarily is available to everybody, or
right,
that everybody can understand. That's a big.
It's normally the medium to larger churches that are able to do the virtual worship service. But when you have a smaller church with, say, about 50 to 75 members, they normally don't have that type of technology. Right. So they're totally missing out right now.
Exactly. And I'd like to add, as far as also sacramental services, like communion. This past, a few weeks ago, we celebrated the first Sunday during this COVID, and just wondering how we were going to get the elements to the persons, to the congregation. And at first it was going to be a drive-by where you could pick up your bread and your wine, even the one that we can do by hand. But then, given how things are changing and the governors are ruling and things, they canceled that. And so everyone was doing it from their home, using a cracker or a piece of bread that they had. And even if they had juice or wine or water, but that's very unnatural, for persons. That was a very disheartening thing for persons.
Yeah. So there's just so many facets to this, and how we've had to change overall. And one of the other ways that I think that I'd love for you guys to talk about is when someone dies. With the loss of life during COVID-19, it has really changed the way we are able to remember that person and have experienced that grief ritual. Can you guys, either of you all, sort of talk about what you've seen regarding the change for that during COVID-19?
Well, I'll let ladies go first.
Oh, okay. Well, one of the experiences I just had recently, the loved one was transitioning, and the wife wanted to know, was the nurse going to stay with her the whole time because she was alone with him? And so then she said, well, then when he dies, I don't want to be alone with my loved one, not living. And so just that being alone, wanting to make sure that, a family member was able to come. And now we have to think about how many people can come. When the funeral home comes, they usually bring 2 people, and then the loved one is home alone, and she, or he was wondering, can I call my son, my sister-in-law, my brother? And so then it got to be thinking about how many people can gather together, and it's just not natural. You want to be able to allow your loved one to die with dignity and not having the person around. And then with the funerals, being able to have a quote unquote funeral, some people are, getting very upset of having to, bury their loved ones or choose cremation and then do a funeral at a later time. And then that causes having to do it a double service, and that will bring up a lot of emotions too. Even if it's 6 weeks down the line when they, have a funeral, having to bring up that again.
Just having to postpone it, like not being able to process it. Brian, what would you have something you wanted to share too?
Surely. Again, I think we spoke about it a little bit earlier. Funerals are somewhat a way of closure for families. And when you have these COVID restrictions that only allow a certain amount of people there, if you come from a large family and you're not able to attend the worship service, a lot of those things are therapeutic when you're able to go to what I term as, again, not a funeral, but a homegoing celebration.
Right.
People need to have that space, to have that time to celebrate the life of their loved one. And in this particular time with these COVID restrictions, it's very hard, and it's an emotional thing that, it's baggage that gets attached to them that they don't get to release. Right. As far as, that would normally be allowed in a funeral service. And Renee spoke about it, about how a lot of family members are worried that their loved ones are dying alone. A lot of family members are worried that they can't have the completion or the closure that they need because of the COVID restrictions. And then Renee again spoke about how you're having to choose sometimes to whether you're going to cremate, to whether you're going to, because you can't just let the body sit.
Right.
And that's something that's really, really weighing and causes a lot of anxiety for family members, because I had one case where one of the family members knew that her mother was against cremation. But the only thing that she could do to preserve the body was to cremate and to have a funeral at a later date. So that caused her emotional distress and anxiety because she knew she was doing something against her mother's will.
That's so hard. There's so many elements to this that have just been such a challenge. What kind of tips or suggestions, or how are you helping folks during this time where we've got so many restrictions that are happening? What are some ways that we can, we can't fix it. It is what it is. We have to be within the confines of this, but what are some suggestions or things you all are offering to folks?
Again, I'll let ladies go first.
So one of the things is, when you go to a funeral, there's usually the sign in when you get to the church or whatever. And so persons are able to sign in and say, so that people can see who was there. And so now we can do that virtually. And so it's something I understand or heard about, a virtual sign-in book. Okay. And so people are posting that maybe on Facebook of all the people that, wanted to come, could not come. And then you can at least get those persons that can attest to the fact that how much they love this person. Then that lets the family know you have all of these people that are kind of on the outside looking in, but they're with you in spirit and emotionally. And so you can kind of read that from a virtual sign-in book, you know, and mostly persons are getting a lot of support from just basic prayer. And, you know, it's not basic, but it's allowing persons to, you know, process their feelings and feel connected to their source of strength, especially during this time. So persons are really looking for prayer.
Well, for me, what I've been telling people is to channel into that thing that occupies your total mind and live within that for a while just to get a release from all the things that are going on. There could be prayer, it could be meditation, it could be a number of different things. For me, what helps me is that I play my saxophone. I get so engrossed in my music that it takes me away for just a little while and takes some of the pressure off. And I encourage people to do that. If you have a hobby, if you have something, if you love reading, if you love anything that occupies your total mind for just a little while, that will provide some sort of relief. And I encourage you to channel it and then make those connections. Do those Zoom calls with your family. Do those Zoom calls with people that you know that you love, and connect with them and talk with them and just check on them. You never know what just a nice, encouraging word will do for you and for someone else. Mm-hmm. So the connection is great with this Zoom and any other media outlet that you're able to use. It's just a number of things that you can do to just, you know, find a little peace at times.
Yeah, I found that music is very soothing. And so even now, you know, because I have a background of singing, so a lot of times, even over the phone, I will sing with the patients or remind them that as Brian was saying, you know, there's all kind of medium. There's YouTube where you can play music and let it play. You can always have the family members, even the nice days that we've had, even though they've been far in between, but walking outside, just looking at a flower and just seeing the beauty in that flower and just being able to meditate on that and reflect on that and come back in because we're having to be, so to speak, inside, we're not able to get out. So just taking a walk, you know, just kind of to give that release and that relief and that comfort.
Yeah, those are great. Those are great suggestions. I think one of the things that, you know, is so hard to differentiate is the term social distancing. Mm-hmm. And yet we need this social connection. So it feels like physical distancing is what we need to think about. And then social connection is a whole nother thing that we need to make sure we're still finding ways that we're interacting, phone calls, you know, whatever, that's huge. We are social creatures that need to interact with each other.
Yeah.
Did you guys have were there resources or any other tips or suggestions that would be helpful for folks in Prince George's County?
Well, like I said, I looked at the paper and I saw that there's they have a liaison for faith-based questions. And I'm sure that can be presented to everybody. It's Pastor Charles McNeil and his, let me put on my eyes.
Put your eyes on.
The website, whether his email address is cw.mcneil@co.pg.md.us. Okay. And I'm sure that he may have some insight for, you know, spirituality questions, things of that nature concerning Prince George's County faith-based organizations, churches, even if you just may need some pastoral advice.
That's awesome. Yeah, we'll make sure we include that in a list at the end of this video.
Yeah.
I think it's on that flyer.
Okay, the resource page, great. Okay.
The resource page, I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
And just resources from persons' churches, you know, as persons are going through, you know, finding out they're not maybe taking care of themselves, not eating, you know, especially over the loss. Even before COVID, you know, when persons are dying, people tend to not take care of themselves and get their nutrition. And so it's even heightened now because of COVID. So a lot of churches will have, for instance, my church, we have a grab and go on Saturdays. You can drive around and get a basket, a food and some of the food banks and different things like that to be able to take care of yourself as you're going through.
Yeah, because definitely the spiritual part and the physical part is all interconnected, and we need to make sure that we're nurturing both. Yeah.
Right. There's a number of churches that still have their food banks open, and they are doing a wonderful, wonderful job of supplying food to those who need it. Like Renee says, my church is doing the same thing, a similar program, providing food for those who need it. So, and our two churches are not just the only ones. There's a number of churches that are doing it. So I would encourage all people to please take advantage of that. If you are in need, set your pride to the side and go and get what you need for you and your family.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate the time you guys took to talk with me today and for sharing ideas and suggestions and having the conversation about the spiritual aspects of what's been happening with COVID-19. So thanks a lot, you guys.
It has been my pleasure.
Blessings to you.